Things I wish I would have known starting out. Tip number one, I feel like one of the most important things is to continuously push the axe. Getting into Act 3 crew mode and getting into in-game is going to be your number one priority. This is going to be tackling a lot of the issues that a lot of you guys might be facing, whether it be, how to level up fast. I'm telling you, the answer is pushing axe. If it's wanting better quality drops, the answer is pushing axe and doing maps, right? Now, this is something that is going to be just the ultimate number one tip so that you guys can get acclimated into the game and you can really start getting the juicy stuff so that you're able to really play and really work on your builds in an effective manner. Now with tip number two, this was definitely something that I was even messing up on myself. And again, I want to help you guys avoid making some of these mistakes because this can save you resources, which we're talking about gold here. And this is making sure that as you are traversing on your passive ability tree, you are actually utilizing your skill points efficiently. Now, what exactly does that mean? Now, the thing is that when you're actually looking at aiming for certain skill nodes, the objective, I would say, is to try to aim for the bigger nodes. Now, the thing is that in some people's minds, they might look at this and say, I need to go around in the full circle here, for example, in order to get this big node. But no, you don't exactly want to do that. You want to use whatever nodes that you need to in order to connect to the bigger node. And then from there, you can take that skill point and put it somewhere else and essentially gain or start working towards another skill path. Now, the thing is that, for example, I had this highlighted and wasn't really realizing that I could just get this 20% increased power charge duration if I needed to much later, but it would be more efficient as I'm in the beginning of my build to try to allocate points to getting me to those nodes that are going to be overall more effective. And then later on, I can come back and tweak things if I really need to. Now, there's a lot of different methods that people have that they utilize to be able to work on their passive skill tree. But this is personally what helped me out and what I felt like really got me to those points, especially with the amount of points that you get in the very beginning and how it can maybe feel a little bit rough depending on the class type that you're working on to get some of those valuable nodes that's really going to make a huge difference in your build. Tip number three is really important when we're talking about gear, because I know a lot of you guys, including myself, did this, went in, hey, I'm going to get a ton of uniques, but I promise you, uniques are not the answer to your problem. What you're actually going to be looking for is rare pieces of gear. And there's a couple of different reasons as to why you're looking for rare pieces of gear. Now, the main reason is because number one, when we're talking about the highest piece of gear that you can actually modify, it's going to be rare pieces. Now, again, one of the most important resources in the game is the Exalted Orb, where you're able to augment rare items with a new modifier. So this means that when you're talking about a unique drops, especially working your way up, not really until you get into like Act 3 Cruel, probably even really more so into maps, they drop fairly low level and they're not that great. Now, does that mean you're just going to get rid of them? Not necessarily. You can vault them or stash them so that you can save them for later if there's any other systems that come out. I'm not 100% sure with that, but it is going to be very important that if you want to power spike, if you want to progress, that you're actually investing in things that you can control or make better. So this is going to be, again, super essential. Now, of course, using the trading system is also another thing that you can take advantage of, but that also could be something that would save you an Exalted Orb or two if you actually understand that, hey, you might have some pieces that you might not have realized that are actually usable and good enough to get you through content. Tip number 4 is very important to your survivability, and it's going to be building into your resistances. Now, that might sound simple, but it's not as simple as it sounds because there's a lot of different things that's going to be varying as you're progressing and pushing content. You're going to be constantly changing your gear, and your resistance isn't going to be exactly the highest at all times. So granted, the goal is ultimately to get to about 75% resistances across the board for both fire, ice, and electric, but that's definitely more of an in-game thing, and you really want to make sure that you're focusing that, especially once you get into Act 2 to 3 and really pushing into your maps, right? Because things are just going to be hitting you much harder, and there's going to be even more penalties to think about. So my advice for those of you guys that are traversing and trying to get through content as, at the moment, it would be essential for you to make sure that you have different attributed rings that are giving you different resistances depending on what you might be fighting. And so this is something that you can go and change as as you're going through content. So for example, you can say, for example, like I'm using the lightning resistance ring. I can go in and change this to fire resistance as I'm fighting a fire boss, right? So again, you're not always going to be changing out your chest piece or changing out your gauntlets or your boots or your belt. I wouldn't really necessarily advise you super early to try to have every attribute covered for a different chest piece. It's not really necessarily something that you're going to be able to do, or it even really makes sense because you're just going to be alternating stuff off too quick. So I would definitely say with your ring pieces, these are going to be the two easiest things that you can just swap on and off. That's going to give you that overall value for at least getting you to that sweet spot of around anywhere from, like, I would say 20 to 30, maybe even 40% resistances, if you can help it as you're working through your content. And lastly, for tip number 5, this is really important, especially if you are struggling and you're like, hey man, I need someone to come and help me. Now, keep in mind that most content, I would say on your own, is going to be a lot more efficient to clear on your own because of the scaling. Once you start adding more people to the party, the scaling does go up. But I would say once you go past 2 people, that's where some bosses might actually become unbeatable for your party, especially depending upon your class types or the amounts of DPS that you guys are able to deal. Now, what you could do is, if you are trying to have someone help you, make sure you go into your settings and you go into a setting called default level downscaling and you disable it. Now, I would only say to disable this, okay? And this is very, very important. Only disable this on bosses. When you are actually farming, you want this enabled. Here's why. Because level downscaling, when it is applied, it will have no EXP penalty. But when it is disabled, there will have, or it will be, an EXP penalty. So you don't want to go through the maps with a penalty because you're farming with someone that's so much higher than you in levels, versus when you're just doing that singular boss, that's not really going to be as significant as, say, for example, you just farmed, mobs for the last half an hour. So this is something that I would say had really helped me as far as being able to get throughout the game. Granted, I did get to up to a certain point where I was strong enough to solo a lot of things. But initially, you might have friends or you might have people that want to help you out. And so this is the best way to allow them to be able to do so. Now, there's a lot of other factors to factor in when we're talking about things that can help you be better at this game. But again, we're going to stop here. Make sure you guys come through to the twitch.tv/ZoxysCon. I do stream Path of Exile. I am fairly new to the game and I'm experiencing things no differently than you guys, but I'm giving you guys some tips and tricks that I hope will help you just as much as it's helped me. But with that, make sure you guys like and subscribe to the channel. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Stay blessed, and I'll see you guys next time.